Life is hectic, demanding, and doesn't stop. When honest with ourselves, we must confess we often don't know what the hell we're doing. The Larkcast is an ongoing conversation about the inclusive and mischievous nature of God's presence through the lens of all the things that make up this phenomenon we refer to as life. Astonishing grace and refreshing honesty collide right here for your weekly encouragement. Hey friends, welcome to the Larkcast. Yes, welcome to the Larkcast. 2026, new year. It has begun. We have a number of things in store for you. Tony will be joining me next week. But to get us started, to kick things off, I'm taking this one alone with some things that I would love to unpack. Some things that I believe that you would find very, very relevant to your life, to your journey, to your pursuit of living in the freedom that faith was actually meant to bring. There are a number of discoveries that we've been able to make over the years, and especially over this past year. And all of those sort of came to a head. Hence the kicking off this new year with this podcast alone to unpack these things. Yeah, unpack them. So let me begin by saying this. Yes. Yes. Yes, again. If you've noticed, we have been quieter on social media lately. And right after announcing all the Lark is finally out. Yeah. Not exactly how you're supposed to launch a book. Yeah. But it is what you do when the thing you're releasing starts to press into a struggle that a rollout plan can't answer. Yeah. And that's what happened for me. Because the more conversations that I have, okay, with people from whether it's around the US or even overseas, the clearer something has become. People are carrying they're carrying a strange mix of relief and restlessness that no amount of content can resolve. Okay. That's what leads me here. All right. Most of us listening to this podcast aren't inside the formal church system anymore. And you didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because something in you knew this wasn't producing the freedom that Jesus gave for you, for your family, or for the neighbors that you love. But when you stepped away, all right, from what I found, something real happened. Okay. When you stepped away, something real happened. Your shoulders dropped, your nervous system exhaled. God stopped feeling like a taskmaster. And the relief you found, well, it was real. Yeah, it was real. But here's the quiet tension many of us live with. We're clearer than we've ever been, and yet not as free as we expect it to be. That discovery is where this story comes in. Okay. I recently got away for a week to visit my parents in North Carolina. They're getting older now, and so I was grateful for the time. One night, we were sitting around a campfire, the kind where the silence feels like a part of the conversation. And my dad and I drifted into a conversation about history, as we always do. My dad was a brick mason by trade, but he loved I would say because he loved the art of building something with his hands. But the man should have been a history professor. Okay, anyone who knows him would say that his intellect and recall are uncanny. All right, names and dates and tactics stored in his brain like a living library. And somewhere in the middle of talking about Lark, okay, about the people that I've met and the struggle they face, I told him something that I keep noticing over the past decade since I stepped away from leading what has been labeled church. I said, I've watched people, myself included, leave the church machine and finally feel relief in who Jesus is, only to mistake that relief for freedom. Okay. Certain that we now see clearly, we grow overconfident in our understanding of what grace actually is. slowly drift from the table shaped life that Jesus gave, and then fail to live in the freedom that's been ours all along. As my dad poked the fire, I mentioned how this discovery reminds me of the story of the of General Hooker. Yeah. And that sent us straight into one of the most revealing insights of the Civil War. Right. Hooker was he was tall, okay, broad shouldered, charismatic, right? Sharp, sharp jawed, right? And backed by a resume of battlefield success. And when he entered the Battle of Chancellorsville in 1863, he had everything in his favor. Okay, everything. He held one of the strongest positions the Union Army ever had. Okay, outnumbering General Lee 2-1. He's dug in on the high ground. He's got every advantage, leading his way. And that's when he delivered this infamous line. Okay, my plans are perfect. May God have mercy on General Lee, for I will have none. And then, and this is the part that gets me, he ordered cattle slaughtered and had his men grill steaks. Yeah. And the smell of smoke rising over the trees. Okay. Soldiers ate a victory meal before the battle even started. Meanwhile, Hooker's scouts kept reporting back to him, hey, General Lee's army is they're up to something. They're they're on the move. Yeah. Each report dismissed with another wave of the hand, right? Another bite of steak. But Lee, outnumbered and cornered, did the impossible. Yeah, he split his army in the dark of night and he sent Stonewall Jackson on this silent 12-mile march through the woods straight toward the part of Hooker's line he assumed was untouchable. Yeah. At dusk, Jackson's corps lets out this spine shivering yell as they hit Hooker's right flank like a freight train. Okay, thousands of Union soldiers were caught mid-digestive cycle. Panic erupted. Hooker was knocked senseless by a cannon blast and never recovered his nerve. And what should have been like the North's easiest victory became its most humiliating defeat. Yeah. And here's the thing my dad and I sat with by the fire that night. Hooker didn't lose the battle because he lacked knowledge. He lost because, as Malcolm Gladwell noted in one of his great writings, his overconfidence in what he knew became his incompetence. Yeah. Yeah. Hooker's overconfidence in what he knew became his incompetence. Yeah. At, and that same overconfidence is quietly, in my opinion, has quietly undone more lives than outright failure ever could, especially in the way that we approach faith. We assume that we assume that once we understand the true difference between the grace Jesus reveals and the religion peddled in his name, we'll finally live free. But knowledge can become a new form of control, blinding us to the fact that the battle we think we've mastered is the battle that we have yet understood. Yeah. Which brings us, to a completely different moment in history and the real diagnosis of what we saw there in Hooker's story. You see, decades after the collapse, at Chancellorsville, a quiet physician named Dr. William Silkworth looked at a defeated drinker named Bill Wilson and said something no one else had ever said. He said, your problem with alcohol isn't a moral failure. It's a disease you can't think your way out of. Yeah. It's a disease you can't think your way out of. That insight echoed and expanded in Wilson's conversations with a guy named Dr. Bob Smith. And together, these two founded an organization that we've talked a lot about called Alcoholics Anonymous in 1935. And with it came a stunning realization, right? Alcoholics weren't failing because they were weak. They were just facing a disease that clarity could never cure. And that's the missing piece in what I've been watching over the years after leaving the formalized church uh, to step out into this adventure, yeah, that we call Lark. Something that I've seen from others and seen, in my own story, just to be clear. Uh, it seems that in a culture steeped in religion, we weren't formed by grace. We were formed by the grind, right? Effort, metrics, a constant sense that God is watching with a clipboard. Which is why when Lark comes along with the news about a gracious God that Jesus actually revealed, the relief that insight, okay, the relief that insight brings, right, feels like freedom. But, and that's the but living in freedom requires something beyond understanding. Okay. It requires something beyond understanding because our real problem isn't ignorance, it's a disease of self reliance. I've said this before. I'm going to say it quickly again for those of you who are new to the Larkcast because this is important. Just as society misdiagnosed alcoholism as a moral failure for centuries, modern Christianity has misdiagnosed sin as misbehavior. Yeah. Yeah. The scriptures describe sin. They describe sin as disobedience, but they define sin as something far deeper. Okay. It's called unbelief. As Paul put it in Romans 14, whatever does not proceed from faith is sin. Whatever does not proceed from faith is sin. In other words, the opposite of sin isn't virtue, it's faith in who God is. And when that trust is missing, we, like Adam and Eve in the garden, okay, chase a sense of security and worth that we can control. That self justifying chase is sin, and it lives in our bones like a disease. Yeah, it does. Our flesh loves the idea of look what I did, look what I'm doing, look what I have, look who I'm with, right? Like our flesh loves that. It's it's the most deceptive drug in the world, and and we're all addicted to it. Yeah. Jesus called this popular path the broad road in Matthew 7. Okay. It's um it's a delusional survival strategy. Okay. Think about it like that. Cling, perform, protect, repeat. Yeah. Cling, perform, protect, repeat. By contrast, the narrow road that Jesus spoke of in Matthew 7 isn't a location in the afterlife. Okay. It's actually a way of being in the world right now. That's what we find, like right there in the Greek. That's what it's describing. It's trusting Jesus's interpretation of reality over our anxiety's interpretation of it. It's surrender to who Jesus is for us when fear demands control. It's rest when the old self insists that the world is somehow depending on you to get it right, right? That's the hell that Jesus came to rescue us from today. Now, that said, if you're like me and millions of others, you know you can't find freedom from that hell in formalized church systems. It's not because people are being malicious. It's not because they're insincere. It's simply because the while grace is talked about there and talked about often, the God being retold isn't actually gracious. Yeah. Yeah, he was actually borrowed a few hundred years after Jesus, where the Greek philosophy really began to take over in shaping what is now often and popular in the name of Christianity. Yeah. Yeah. So formalized church systems, the invention of these things for centuries, they describe God as love. I know I did. But they frame his forgiveness and acceptance as something that depends on our efforts. Okay. Like our faith, our obedience, our sincerity, which quietly turns faith, and you got to hear this, into a work. Yeah. Yeah. The faith alone by grace alone camp uh, actually is the opposite. It's yeah, it's it's by work alone. Salvation, okay, becomes something that is obtained and sustained by our doing. If that happens, uh, then you don't have a salvation that's secured by Jesus. You have a salvation that is secured by you. That's a works based salvation. That's the opposite of what Jesus says. So, yes, people may hear about grace, 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 God's grace, God's grace, God's grace every week, week in, week out, sing it week in, week out, and yet remain bound, right? Because grace is talked about everywhere. However, people living free are rare. Why? Well, because the conditional God that is spoken of there cannot free anyone. He can't. But here's another but. And this is where like sort of the past years ahas really brought about some moments of sitting down and looking in the mirror and going, wow, man, you got to love the Spirit of God who's just not done with us and continues to shape us. Because here's the twist that no one talks about. Okay. Leaving the formalized church doesn't cure the addiction we have. It doesn't. It just removes its favorite playground. And once the playground is gone, the universal addiction to self justification simply gets creative. It's sneaky like that. It shapeshifts. It rebrands the old self. Okay, the old self, what the scriptures refer to as Adam, right? The flesh, the one trained to chase attention, relevance, and worth. It doesn't lie down and die. It doesn't. It just finds a new stage to survive. So yes, leaving that formalized system, you might have found a like genuine relief from the mythical God of conditions that you've known all your life. And amen for it. I know I did. Um, but that doesn't mean that you're going to find the freedom that Jesus gave. Relief in a moment and ongoing freedom are not the same thing. Um, because our flesh, again, it doesn't lay down and die. It just finds a new stage to survive. Some believers poured into entrepreneurship, and now their identity is their brand, their hustle, their self made image. Some swap church performance for political righteousness. That's a big one right now. And now their worth comes from being on the right side of history, they say. Some swap it for social causes. Now they're good because they're loudly aligned with something that they were told is right. And some drag it into social status, turning their style and their feed into a curated altar where their identity is built through opinions and, let's say, applause. Yeah. The point here is it's the same drug, it's just a different dealer. And the systems, okay, are the symptoms, I should say, they're identical wherever you look. We're less patient because people still feel like threats, right, to your ambition. A symptom could be that you're less available because independence feels safer than intimacy. A symptom could be that you're less generous because fear, not love, is what used to power your giving. Yeah, that's a real one. More curated, that's a symptom, right? Because your circle of friends has become your sense of worth. Or maybe you're more anxious because you're still trying to define yourself in this world. I see it everywhere, even in myself. People walk away from the church system, but the church system didn't walk out of them. It's still running in the background, feeding the same delusional insecurity with new material. And here's the brutal but freeing truth. Talking about grace is easy. Living the life of grace costs your false self. You see, anyone can say, I found Jesus. I'm done with religion. But dying to the image that makes you feel like you matter, being present with people who don't elevate your status, giving money with no ROI. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's different, right? That's that's the death and resurrection that Jesus outlined in Ephesians, or I should say Paul outlined in Ephesians 2. That's the taking up your cross that Jesus spoke of in Matthew 16. Most of us don't see this. I know I didn't and haven't, and times where I still don't. Um, and it's not because we're hopelessly depraved or stubborn. No, but because the addiction to self justification that we've been taught to feed is subtle. It looks like success, it feels like autonomy. And the worst part, it gets applause. Yeah. So please hear me when I say, if that's you, if you're someone who found relief through clarity in who God actually is, right? In view of the religion that you were handed, but now you still struggle to actually live into the freedom that Jesus gave. It's it's not because you're a failed Christian, okay? You're just trapped in cycles of a rebranded version of that same old bondage of religion, which is why freedom requires more than clarity. It requires an ongoing environment. Yeah, it really does. And from what I've been able to find for over a decade now, there is just no getting around it. It seems like Jesus knew this, which is why he ended his ministry in Matthew 28. He doesn't end it with, now go and make disciples of all nations. We often hear it that way, but he doesn't end it that way. He actually ends it with the next verse when he says, teach them to observe everything that I've shown you. You see, observe there, okay, does not mean obey the rules, as many of our translations misquote. The word terero in Greek that Jesus used means to treasure. It means to keep coming back to what's true. In other words, teach people how to return, Jesus says, how to remember what is good and beautiful through a simple meal called communion, how to laugh at the lies that we keep buying and celebrate again and again the grace that already holds us. That's what happens at the table that Jesus modeled for us. Okay. No pressure, no improvement plan, no stages, no lights, no 501c3 status, no buildings, no advertised services. I could keep going here. Just bread, wine, honesty, laughter, and a life slowly being formed by the grace that holds us and will never let us go. Which is why the next phase of Lark, you could say, makes sense. You see, we found that clarity doesn't set people free. It doesn't. It has a valuable role, but it also has a shelf life. And leaving the church machine also doesn't heal our addiction. No, no, to live sober, we need an ongoing table of grace, a simple space where we are, wherever we are in life, at a kitchen table, on a porch, with a spouse or a friend, right? Just two or more people, all right, as Jesus put it, pulling up a chair throughout life to laugh at the lies that we keep falling back into and celebrating the grace that breaks them. Yeah, that's the life that we've been invited into. That's where we learn to live in the freedom that Jesus actually gave. And the best part, reimagining the church around tables of grace isn't just for me and isn't just for you. It's actually for the healing and hope of our world. Yeah. Yeah, because when everyday people stop funding pressure and start practicing faith around tables, the world gets something it rarely sees: friends who are free, friends who are available, friends who are honest, friends who are generous, with actual good news for everyone. Yeah. Yeah, that's the life that Jesus meant when he said, "And surely I am with you always." That's what he meant. That's the church that Jesus actually started, the one that we find in the New Testament letters that described what people who took him at his word did. Yeah. And that's the life that Lark exists to empower through everyday people like you. Yeah. To get started, if you're new to this, or even if you've been with us for a while and you just need to go back and take a look at some things that are true, some things that are good, some things that are beautiful, some reminders, some clarity around just stepping into something where you are, even if it's again just with your spouse or just with you and your kids. Go to the new revised website, larksite.com. In the menu, you will find a link, okay, to a pathway page, complete with links to various resources that are not just for you, they're for everyone that you meet, everyone that you invite into this story that Jesus gave us. Yeah, it's there, free for the taking. Which, if you got my email from last week or from a couple weeks ago, I should say, it's not just the podcast that's kicking back up, starting with this one on a weekly basis, but there's also a number of other resources that are on the way that help bring about that foundation that we're needing, so that we can step beyond endless this endless thing within American Christianity and abroad. Just to be clear, it's not just a here thing where it's just a constant hearing about freedom, talking about freedom, thinking about freedom, and actually move beyond that with the foundation we need into the ongoing formation that happens when we start living in freedom and helping others do the same. Yeah. Because as I've said, and I'm going to keep saying, talk of grace is everywhere. Lives marked by freedom are rare. Together, this is how we change that. Yeah, this is how we change it. So join us, my friends. Join us. And as always, reach out with any questions. larksite.com. It's a contact button there. Love to hear from you. Love to hop on a call with you. Email or chat, whatever's best for you. Reach out. And until next time, cheers.